C7 versus C8 Corvette, oh my goodness, each of these sophisticated machines represents some of the finest modern sports car engineering available on planet Earth today. The C7 is apparently as far as the Chevrolet engineering team could possibly refine the 60-year-old platform of having the Corvette's engine up front, with the rear tires solely responsible for propelling the vehicle.
This is the right time to move to mid-engine. We've actually known for quite a while we are reaching the limits of performance in a front-engine configuration.
While not the first mid-engine production car General Motors has ever made, the Pontiac Fiero, of course, owns that distinction. The C8 is the first mid-engine Corvette to actually be put into production, and produce them they have. In fact, up until just recently, GM has been selling C8 Corvettes as fast as they can possibly make them, and dealers and/or original buyers have been making quite a bit of money, selling or flipping them above MSRP until now. Finally, after 5 long years, the C8 Corvette market has softened, and prices are actually reasonable. Guys, I've had the C5 for over 10 years now, and I've had the C6 for just 2 years. And make no mistake, I love them both, but like most Corvette guys, I'm already starting to think about my next Corvette and what generation it might be.
Toys for life.
Natural progression would seem to indicate that a C7 is in the cards, and it just might be, but if you've seen my C6 versus C7 video, then you know that I wouldn't touch the vast majority of C7s that were made due to the widely documented problems that Chevrolet has had with its infamous 8-speed automatic transmission. More on that in just a little bit. For many of us, our Corvettes are not our primary means of transportation, and instead, they're typically reserved for evening and weekend recreational drives, but only if Mother Nature cooperates. When not in use, they typically occupy a prominent space in your garage so they can put a smile on your face anytime you happen to walk by, or you just walk by on purpose. I bring this up because I believe enjoying the looks of your sports car should absolutely be on the list of wants and must-haves that we all put together or should put together when trying to decide which Corvette to buy. Another few items that I think should be at or near the top of most people's lists would be, of course, performance, reliability, and price, and in my opinion, value. Or in other words, exactly how much performance am I getting for every dollar I spend? Oh, and by the way, in my opinion, the C5 Corvette still ranks right there at the top of the best performance value of all of the Corvettes. But in this video, I'm looking at future Corvettes that I might purchase, so let's move on. Let's talk about price for just a moment or two. In science, there's a saying that says, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I like to apply that same logic when purchasing my Corvettes. For example, let's talk about a hypothetical situation where you've got $85,000 to spend. For that money, you could get a C6 ZR1.
It's much too wide, and in the corners, it's a complete madman.
And it's absolutely a beast of a car, but for 98% of the people out there, I don't think you should buy it. The C6 ZR1 has way too much brutal torque way down low. That's way too much for street tires on public roads, and it also has insane brakes that almost nobody needs, and they're also insanely expensive. Instead, I would recommend that that person pick up a C6 Z06, which many regard as being one of the best Corvettes ever made. They're only about $45,000. Make sure you get the heads fixed, or better yet, you could save another 10 to 15 grand, pick up an LS2 or LS3 C6, put on an A&A Supercharger, and have an insanely fast C6 Corvette, and have enough money left over to take your wife on a Caribbean cruise, maybe even 2 cruises. So for my next Corvette, as of right now, I'm mainly focused on, as the title of this video gives away, either a C7 or a C8. I like to approach this process mainly from a logic-driven angle, with one exception, and that is aesthetics, which of course are 100% subjective. As I mention frequently, I really have to like the looks of any sports car I buy, and that's because it gives me a warm fuzzy before I even get behind the wheel, and to me, That's super important. So with that, let's go ahead and start with the aesthetics between the C7 and the C8 to help me zero in on my next Corvette. I'll be putting up several views of each generation from the same vantage point back to back to help us both to decide. Of course, I'll be providing my commentary along the way, so let me know in the comments if you agree with me or you think I'm nuts. Starting with the front, here's the C7 and then the C8. I find them fairly similar, but to me, the front of the C8 looks more precise and simply more beautiful for the win. Moving to the front 3/4, here is the C8 and the C7. And to me, they both look great, but again, I like the sharper, more precise lines of the C8 over the C7. So for 2 in a row, I'm giving this one to the C8. Let's go to the full side view of the C7. And here's the C8. To me, the C7 looks more proportional, and to me, the C8 side, especially the rear side, looks a little bit odd. I'm giving this view to the C7 for a solid win. Moving on to the rear of the C8 and the C7, I don't think I've heard anyone raving either rear end, and that includes me, but I'm going to have to take the C8's rear end as being a little more pleasing to my eyes. And finally, here is the C7 dash, followed by the C8 dash. Keep in mind, you'll be looking at these a lot as you're driving these cars. Back to the C7's dash, but to me, the C8's dash gets the win. So even though I like the aesthetics of both cars, overall the C8 just has more views that I like quite a bit better. So for me, visually, the C8 gets the win. Let's transition to price, and because there are several variants within each generation, as you can imagine, the prices vary substantially. Within the C7 generation, from cheapest to most expensive, you can pick up a used Stingray for about $35,000. You've got the Grand Sport coming in at about $52,000. The Z06 can be had for around $80,000. And that ZR1, it's up there. It's at about $140,000. Under the umbrella of the C8, there's also 4 versions. Starting out from cheapest to most expensive, you've got the Stingray, which can finally be had for around $58,000. The Z06 is about $130,000, and the prices are dropping now that the ZR1 has come out. The E-Ray, well, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not interested. It's overly complicated, and so I don't even know what the price is. And the C8 ZR1 is coming in at around $200,000 if you can find one. And later this year, I don't even know what the price is, maybe $250,000. You've got the ZR1X. Now, to be frank, several of the variants I just mentioned I'm going to be eliminating from further consideration right now, simply because they cost too much money for me to seriously consider. Now, if any of you guys want to send in a wheelbarrow full of money, I certainly don't have any problem taking delivery of a C8 ZR1.
Complete confidence. These are the highest speeds I've ever experienced at a racetrack, Mark.
So the good news is, I don't know about you, but I seem to be able to make decisions much easier when there's less choices. So let's move on to the performance of the 3 remaining Corvettes. Horsepower is what moves these cars, so let's start out with how much you get with each variant. The C7 Stingray and Grand Sport both use the 6.2-liter LT1 V8 direct injected engine, and it puts out about 460 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs and 465 pound-feet of torque at 4,600 RPMs. It's important to point out that all of the LT1 engines that went into the Grand Sports came with dry sump oiling, which is great for road racing, as did some of the LT1 engines that went into the Stingrays, depending on which options were ordered. The C8 Corvette came with the LT2 engine, which again is a 6.2-liter direct injected V8 engine. It put out about 495 horsepower at about 6,500 RPMs and 470 pound-feet of torque at 5,150 RPMs. GM engineers must have felt like it was important, so every LT2 engine that went into a C8 Corvette has dry sump oiling, and that should tell you something. Now the difference between the C7's 460 horsepower and the C8's 495 horsepower doesn't seem like much, but it is. And here's why. Remember the guy who said this?
This is the right time to move to mid-engine. We've actually known for quite a while we were reaching the limits of performance in a front engine configuration.
I know, there's a lot of people saying all kinds of things about Corvettes on the internet, but this individual is no ordinary person. That was Taj Jukter, and he was the chief engineer for both the C7 Corvette and the C8 Corvette. So when he says something about the performance capabilities of these cars, his opinion matters more than just about anyone on the face of the planet. Next, let's look at each car's weight, because how many pounds each horsepower is forced to move tells the power story much better than horsepower numbers alone. The base C7 Stingray comes in just shy of 3,300 pounds. If you add the Z51 package, you're closer to 3,400 pounds. And if you go with the Grand Sport, that brings the total up to close to 3,500 pounds. The C8 Stingray comes in at somewhere around 3,500 to 3,600 pounds. So let's just say the C8 is 100 pounds heavier than the C7. And if that's the case, each C7 horsepower has to accelerate 7.4 pounds. And every C8 horsepower has it a little bit easier and only has to accelerate 7.1 pounds. All things being equal, and they are not, the C8 should be just a little bit quicker than the C7. Braking, all three of the cars can stop on a dime, and the brakes are so good that somehow they manage to give you 12 cents back. I did quite a bit of digging and I found a lot of variation in the published 60 mile an hour to 0 stopping times for both the C7 and the C8. And I think this is because the brake rotors, the pads, the calipers, and the tires on both of these cars are so good that I think ultimately it's probably the amount of friction of the road surface at wherever the testing is done, as well as the temperature of the road surface and the tires when that testing is done, that makes up for much of the variance. So generally all three of these cars are going to stop from 60 miles per hour in somewhere between 95 and 110 feet. The standard brakes on the C7 and the C8 Stingray are going to be more than adequate for 99% of the owners, but if you happen to be a track rat, the Z51 brake package that comes with the C7 Grand Sport is going to have a higher capacity for dissipating heat, making it better for road course racing. Now let's move on to acceleration, where the C8's mid-engine design should pay the most dividends. Both the C7 Stingray and Grand Sport will accelerate from 0 to 60 miles an hour in between 3.6 and 3.9 seconds, with the automatic transmission equipped cars generally averaging closer to the 3.6 seconds. The C8 Corvette easily beats that time by achieving the same 60 miles per hour in somewhere between 2.8 and 3.0 seconds. The ability of the C8 to accelerate from a dead stop is simply phenomenal, and in my opinion, it is the biggest difference that a blindfolded passenger would most easily be able to notice if you were to take them in back-to-back testing between the two generations. Oh, and with such great acceleration off the line, it comes as no surprise that the C8 makes it through the quarter mile significantly quicker and faster as well. So if I haven't made it blatantly obvious, I'm pretty sold on the C8 Corvette. I love the way it looks. Its interior is a huge leap forward. It's got plenty of power, and I believe this generation has been in development longer than any other generation of Corvette, going back really all the way to the days of Zora Arkus Duntov. Then of course there's those words from the chief engineer of both the C7 and the C8.
We've actually known for quite a while we were reaching the limits of performance in a front engine configuration.
And they just keep replaying in my mind. But not so fast. What about value? Which generation offers the most performance for the money? I have to admit, especially because you can pick up a decent C7 Stingray specimen for between 35 and 40 grand, it probably is the better performance deal, and I certainly couldn't fault you for buying a C7 over a C8, especially if you happen to like the looks of the C7 better. What about reliability? Well, with the C7, its 8-speed automatic transmission seems to have been plagued by issues throughout the years that may or may not be resolved. So if you do go for a C7 Corvette, I would strongly suggest finding one with a 7-speed manual transmission. And with the C8, unfortunately, there's a lot of internet chatter that it might be having transmission issues of its own, this time with its dual clutch transmission, and it may be experiencing failure rates that many people consider to be higher than normal. And frankly, this has me a bit concerned. So for now, I will continue to read as much as possible and following along as the 8th generation of Corvette ages, both in terms of time and miles. That way we'll be able to get a better idea of what the real reliability issues are, if any, before pulling out my checkbook. Let me know your thoughts about this comparison in the comments below, especially if you've owned a C7 and or a C8. I'd absolutely love to read about your firsthand experiences. That's going to do it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed the video, tap that thumbs up, consider subscribing, and most of all, thanks for watching.